She's a female doctor, a lady doctor. If female nurses are the angels in white, then perhaps female doctors are goddesses in white. She seemed to be around my age, 35, or maybe a bit older. Not bad looking at all. Far from it. She had features that were quite appealing to men. However, when I addressed her as doctor, she showed no reaction, expressionless as she scanned through the X-ray and MRI images on the monitor. "An ambulance, doctor," she said brusquely, not even a hint of a smile. The ambulance had been called by the other party. "My name is David. I had to go to City Hall that day, so I took the afternoon off from work. On my way back, I saw an elementary school boy playing ball. He ran into the street chasing the ball. A large, thick tree created a blind spot for the cars on the street. The traffic wasn't too heavy, but the cars were driving fast. I watched the flow of cars and the boy. This is bad, I thought, dangerous. He's going to get hit. I reflexively ran to stop the boy. Almost simultaneously, I heard the screech of a car's sudden braking. I lifted the boy up, but ouch, the hood of the abruptly stopped car hit me around the waist. The man driving the car rushed to me in a panic. I told him I was fine. It was just a slight hit. But the man fled and called an ambulance. I was transported to this hospital by ambulance for the first time in my life. There were no visible injuries, but I underwent X-ray and MRI examinations. While waiting for the results, the boy I had shielded was brought to the hospital by his mother. The boy, scolded severely by his mother, apologized to me repeatedly, asking if I was hurt. "I'm fine. I'm indestructible. But remember, never run onto the road again. Understand?" The action I took in the spur of the moment prevented a major accident, and I was being thanked for it. With that thought, the pain in my waist felt like nothing, and I was in high spirits. Then a young female nurse came to call me for the examination results. She said to the boy, "You're lucky, saved by a handsome man," and gave me a smile. Truly an angel in white, it seemed like there were countless twinkling stars around her smile. Right after that came that goddess in black. There were absolutely no twinkling stars, and it seemed like she had thick, dark storm clouds on her back as she treated me coldly. "David, about this weekend." "Not again. I told you, I'm good." I declined an invitation from my junior at work, who was obsessed with events for singles. About 6 months ago, this junior asked me to join him as he didn't want to go alone, and I went to an event for singles just once. I wasn't interested to begin with, and indeed, I didn't meet anyone special. It wasn't fun at all. I too think it's about time to settle down since I'm getting older, but I would prefer a more natural encounter. Indeed, I yearned for meeting someone, but I had no desire to attend another event for singles. Besides, at this time, I had someone on my mind, the female doctor who was cold to me. Her aloofness only piqued my interest more. I couldn't help but dwell on it. Well, I don't think it's likely, but in the case of a traffic accident, symptoms like whiplash sometimes appear later. So if that happens, make sure to get checked out at some orthopedic clinic. I remembered her words as I touched the part of my waist where the cars had grazed. It was still a bit painful. All right, it's not completely healed. In that case, why not go and get it checked? Time is of the essence. The next day, I went to see her for a consultation. "Oh, the one from the other day. Are you not feeling well?" The amiable nurse addressed me. I managed to smile and asked her the important question. "Is the doctor who's been seeing me married?" "If you're talking about Dr. Emma, she's single. Why do you ask?" I did a silent fist pump and said I was just curious since a female orthopedic surgeon is rare. I was sweating, hoping she didn't see through my ulterior motive. Just then, my name, David, was called. When I entered the consultation room, she was checking my medical record on the computer. "What brings you here?" "My waist is still hurting from the accident." She looked at the record again. "It shouldn't be a big deal. She casually suggested another checkup if I was still worried. I hesitated, and she remarked, "Is this your first traffic accident? Some patients overreact, especially the timid ones." She was half smirking, a bit condescending. I got a little annoyed. "But it still hurts. I can prescribe some painkillers." She stared at me as she said this. "It really isn't a big deal. If you don't believe me, why not get a second opinion from another hospital?" I had no choice but to back off. That weekend, I was at my regular bar, having a drink with the bar owner. I wonder if female doctors usually marry other doctors. The bar owner stopped chopping and looked puzzled. I continued, partly talking to myself. They earn more, are smarter, and have strong personalities and high pride. They're out of reach for an average office worker like me. As I muttered, the bar owner asked, "So you want to date a female doctor?" "No, not at all. It's just a general opinion. Just a general opinion." As I responded, I realized my mind was full of thoughts about her. She doesn't give me the time of day, treating me with nothing but coldness. But the colder I'm treated, the more the fire within me burns. Am I the type of guy who likes such treatment? As I'm pondering this, my phone starts ringing. It's a picture message from my junior who loves matchmaking parties. He sent me photos he took at a matchmaking party he attended that day. Seeing how desperate he was to get married made me feel pitiful, realizing I'm not that different. After seeing the photos he sent, suddenly the idea of drinking alone at the bar seemed less appealing. It had just gone past 7 o'clock in the evening, but I paid the bill and headed home. Then, just as I left the bar, a woman's happy voice called out to me. I looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young girl smiling at me. I didn't know who she was. I thought she was calling out to me, but I looked around to see if it was someone else. There was no one else standing. "How are you feeling?" Then I finally recognized her. It was that friendly nurse. "Oh, I hardly recognized you. I thought you were just some girl." A white nurse coat is powerful. It can turn any girl into an angel. She also lived around here, so we walked together, making small talk. "By the way, is Dr. Emma always like that?" I brought her up. "Dr. Emma? Like what?" "Just between us, she seems kind of aloof and hard to approach." To her surprise, I was the first patient to describe her that way. Not only is she an excellent doctor, but she's also friendly and popular among the patients. I listened while nodding, but I just couldn't accept it. "Well, I'm going this way." I watched the angel without a white uniform walking away. So she's only cold to me. Could it be she's playing hard to get? My thought process was unusually optimistic. The pain in my back disappeared before I finished the painkillers she prescribed, and there was no new symptom. So I lost the chance to visit her clinic. However, I noticed the chain on my seldom-used bike parked at the apartment complex had rusted. I decided to ride it for a test and pedal for the first time in a while. The chain made some noise, but there were no serious issues. The bigger problem was the flat tires and the brakes not working well, so I decided to take it to a bike shop. I rode the bike and reached an intersection. The light was changing from green to yellow. The bike shop was just across the intersection. I was too lazy to stop, so I pedaled into the intersection and collided with a turning vehicle perfectly. Thanks to the other car's abrupt braking, it didn't end up in a major incident. I scraped my arm when I fell, but it was just a minor bleed. The leg I banned wasn't in much pain either. The female driver who got out of the car went pale and offered to call an ambulance. But I was the one who rode recklessly, and it's just a scrape, so I refused. Afterward, we called the police and dealt with the accident. I didn't get home until the evening. I shouldn't have been riding a bicycle. I should have left the rusty chain as it was. Regret was all that came to my mind. Maybe because of that, I had no appetite and felt down. My mind was foggy, probably exhausted from the police inquiry and stuff. The leg that got hit started throbbing in pain, so I decided to go to bed early and promptly got in bed. The next morning, I woke up when a sharp pain ran through my leg as I rolled over. I felt nauseous and out of sorts. Symptoms like whiplash might appear later in case of a traffic accident. Her voice echoed in my mind. Is this it? Is this what she meant? I had no choice but to go to the hospital. So I called in sick to work and went to her clinic. How can I help you today? When I staggered into the consultation room, she, who was looking at her computer, hurriedly stood up and supported me. Then she gently led me to the examination bed. I was riding a bicycle yesterday and got hit by a car. I explained the situation and how the pain in my leg worsened this morning and that I felt nauseous. Let's get you tested right away. Her voice was filled with a kindness that wrapped around one's heart, unlike any I had heard before. Her usual cold demeanor had done a complete 180. Could it be that I'm seriously injured, need major surgery, or have after effects? On her advice, I was admitted to the hospital immediately. I asked my colleague, who loved events for singles, to bring the minimum necessary belongings from my home. Then she appeared in the hospital room to inform me of the X-ray and MRI results. I had a mild concussion and bruises all over. The concussion is very mild. A neurosurgeon has confirmed there is nothing to worry about. There were bruises other than on your leg, but there's no abnormality in any bones. You're lucky. All my worries about surgery and after effects were unfounded. With this in mind, I asked, "Really?" Then she said, "Really," and gave me a kind smile. Seeing her face, my heart rate soared. She was most concerned about the severely bruised and swollen right leg. If the pain is too much and walking alone is difficult, she suggested staying in the hospital for about a week to observe the progress. Of course, I followed her advice. Is the female doctor who just left your assigned doctor? David, when she left the hospital room, my company's junior asked. When I responded yes, my colleague crossed his arms and fell into thought. When I asked, "What's wrong?" he said, "I feel like I've met her somewhere before." My injury was healing well, and I was told I could be discharged as planned. There was no need for any special rehab, but I had to visit the hospital once a month for the time being. On the day of discharge, while I was packing my belongings in my room, she came to see me. "You're being discharged today. Congratulations. Thank you for everything." As I bowed my head, she, seeming a bit shy, greeted me with a subtle smile. I was deeply moved by this, and I couldn't help but blurt out. Actually, at first, I thought this wasn't going to work. "What do you mean by not going to work? What wasn't going to work?" She looked at me with surprise. "I mean the compatibility with you. Why did you think we wouldn't get along? Can you tell me why?" I talked while scratching my head, feeling awkward. When I was first brought in by the ambulance, her attitude seemed cold. According to a female nurse I talked to later, apparently, I was one of the very few people she treated like that. "I see," she stopped mid-sentence and looked around the room. Then, leaning close to my ear, she whispered softly, "I have a break coming up soon, so once you're ready, maybe we could meet in the courtyard." Well, okay. I looked at her suspiciously. She implied she had something to say that she didn't want the other patients to hear. "So, it's not good here. Let's continue our talk there, okay. What is this conversation going to be about?" Hope and anxiety were swirling inside me. After completing the discharge procedures, I went to the courtyard where she was waiting during her break. As I approached her on the bench, she opened her mouth with a bitter smile. I'm the one who's not good at mixing personal feelings when examining patients. Personal feelings. When I asked back, she nodded and explained. Even though I had gotten into a car accident protecting a child and was injured, I joked about being indestructible because I had only minor injuries. That had angered her. Hearing this, I felt like I understood. Doctors are dealing with patients brought in by ambulances with all they have. Her being angry at me for being lighthearted was just the other side of that. I reflected on my behavior. I felt bad and remained silent. Then she suddenly changed her tone and said jokingly, mocking herself, "And this is a bit embarrassing, but when you kept calling me doctor, doctor, I realized." Realize what? Don't you remember that matchmaking party? My mind was filled with question marks. The only matchmaking party I remember was the one I attended about 6 months ago as a favor to my junior. During the talk time, it was customary for both men and women to ask each other, "What do you do?" I plainly said, "I'm a doctor." Then I got some weird looks. Jokingly, people started saying things like, "I've been having some pain here," or suddenly started calling me doctor, doctor. Hearing this, I remembered. At that matchmaking party, back then, I was told by my junior that there was a female doctor. For fun, I kept calling her Doc and teased her quite a bit that time. "Oh, was it you, Dr. Emma?" When I asked, she nodded. Her makeup and vibe were totally different, and I hadn't realized it until that moment. Or maybe, just like the angels in white coats, I thought it might be the magic of the white coat. She remembered the humiliation from that party and acted cold towards me. I'm sorry about that. But when doctors are off duty, we're just normal women. It seems like she keeps professional and personal separate. Since then, I meet her once a month for consultations. At the same time, I meet her 2 or 3 times a week, seeing her as just a woman outside the hospital. Just the other day, I took her to my regular bar for the first time. The bar owner whispered, asking what her job was. When I replied she was a doctor, he nodded several times. "What happened?" she asked me, looking puzzled, so I explained. I had previously discussed with the bar owner whether a doctor would marry another doctor or wouldn't consider a regular guy like me. She chuckled. I asked her, "As a matter of fact, what do you think?" It depends on the individual, doesn't it? Some doctors marry other doctors, and some don't. It seems there are people who are set on marrying doctors, but it isn't necessarily the case. Do you mind not marrying a doctor? I don't worry about the job. I don't have to marry a doctor. If I did, I wouldn't be here with you. Does that mean? I couldn't help but look at her. She, with an innocent face, picked up the menu. I was foolish to think aiming for a female doctor was aiming too high. Having high aspirations and love is what brought her and me together, and it's what will keep her and me together moving forward. How was the story today? Pressing the subscribe and like button will encourage more productions. Looking forward to your comments. See you in the next video. That's exactly what my contract states. Clean up, pack up, and leave behind a single dime sealed in an envelope. The company that I dedicated 30 years of my life to deserves me this small pension. However, the current president, Steven Tyler, who is young, arrogant, and the second-generation heir, made fun of me as though my years of arduous work were in vain. I felt completely demoralized and hollowed out by his attitude. I no longer felt any connection to this company. It had changed into something completely different, a company that no longer gave a damn about its workers. I refrained from arguing. He handed me a packet, and I just nodded and said, "Understood." I immediately went to the systems management room after that. I deleted every piece of information from the business's management system there. Although it may seem like a terrible thing to do, it was specified in the contract as one of my duties. I did the necessary cleanup as directed by the president. That was my last assignment. A few moments later, the office was in disarray. "Hey, I am unable to send emails." "What's happening?" someone cried. And further voice added, "I also am unable to access the internal system." Panic and bewilderment were in the air. Then, looking pale and obviously scared, the president himself rushed toward me. "Steven, what is going on here?" His voice was shaking as he questioned, "Are you okay?" Calmly, I turned to him. My long-standing conflict with the company's second-generation president really started at that point. Stephen William is my name. I've worked for this company for nearly my whole life, and I'm 50 years old. I've been here the longest, having started shortly after high school. My dedication makes me something of an outlier in a time when changing jobs is normal. My work as the systems management manager has always been demanding, but I enjoy it. I had less work to do directly as my younger coworkers grew more proficient over time. I was pleased with what I had created, and life seemed good. One day, Samuel, one of my best juniors, came up to me with a worried expression. He pointed to his screen and said, "Mr. William, I think there's a mistake here, but I'm not sure what's causing it." I took a look behind him. "This code is incorrect. I see. Here's how it ought to be," I clarified, resolving the problem. Samuel gave me a smile. "I'm grateful, Mr. William. Without you, I'm not sure how we'd manage." I returned the smile. "You'll be in charge of everything soon enough. I am depending on you." Samuel chuckled uneasily. "I'm not ready for that yet." "What are you talking about?" "Well," I said, "I'll be 50 soon, so I've been thinking about how I'll spend my retirement." Samuel shook his head. "You've still got over a decade left, Mr. William. Why are you even talking about retiring?" Being in his 30s, Samuel didn't yet understand how quickly time flies. Still, I'd assured him, I plan to keep working hard until the day I leave. There's a lot I still want to accomplish before then. Back then, I felt satisfied with my life and proud of my career. But everything changed so suddenly. It started when Ethan Tyler, the company's founder and president, fell ill and had to be hospitalized. His condition worsened unexpectedly, leaving no hope for recovery. In his absence, his only son, Stephen, swiftly took over as president. Stephen wasted no time delivering an emotional inaugural speech. "This situation has shocked us all, but it's time to unite and move forward together. We'll bring out the changes this company needs to thrive," he declared. His enthusiasm was almost contagious. At first, his words lifted everyone's spirits. Stephen had an undeniable charisma that made people believe in him. I'd known him briefly during his stint at a subsidiary, and I truly believed he could carry on his father's legacy. But my optimism didn't last. Not long after stepping into his role, Stephen began focusing on efficiency and cost-cutting. His sweeping changes included sudden reorganizations, staff layoffs, and transfers that disrupted the entire office. Chaos quickly followed. The most heartbreaking part of his leadership, however, was how he treated the company's senior, long-serving employees. Instead of valuing their experience, he saw them as obstacles to younger workers' growth. Rather than firing them outright, he demoted them to lower roles with significant pay cuts. For instance, skilled salespeople were reassigned to desk jobs, while support staff, who struggled in these new positions, eventually quit out of frustration. Meanwhile, younger employees were promoted at lightning speed, often without the necessary skills or experience to justify it. At first, I tried to make sense of it. If the younger workers were genuinely talented, I might have understood. But the truth was, their performance reviews didn't reflect their capabilities. The company's talented young workers, disillusioned by the favoritism, left in droves. Those who stayed were mostly the president's loyal sycophants, benefiting from undeserved perks. Today, yet another trusted colleague of mine announced they were leaving. The team I had worked with for decades was falling apart, one resignation at a time. He was one of our top salespeople, someone who consistently boosted the company's revenue. As he packed up to leave, he smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for everything, Stephen." I forced a smile, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But why are you leaving? You're so good at what you do." He let out a heavy sigh and replied, "I'm just tired of giving my all to this place. It doesn't feel worth it anymore." Then he looked at me and added, "But Stephen, you're the backbone of this company. No one else can manage the systems like you do. Hang in there." As he grinned, probably trying to lighten the mood, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I tried to smile back, but my heart ached. I should have been waving him off with a cheerful farewell, but all I could do was watch him leave, his back disappearing into the distance. How many times had I seen colleagues, friends, walk away like this? You'd think a mass exodus like this would spark a rebellion, but nothing ever happened. Talented employees left, leaving behind only those who were overworked, resigned to their fates, or loyal to President Stephen. I was one of the determined ones, still clinging to the company I had once loved. But it was clear the company was on a downward spiral. The signs of decline were everywhere, and even President Stephen seemed increasingly uneasy. "This is just a temporary setback," I overheard him telling his supporters one day. "It's like crouching before a big leap forward. We'll bounce back soon." I couldn't believe the arrogance in his words, especially when those around him blindly echoed, as expected from the president. It was obvious he wasn't willing to admit his mistakes. Frustrated, I returned to the system management room, where Samuel was waiting for me. "Mr. William, there's big news," Samuel said excitedly. "The president is coming to inspect the system management room today." "What?" I exclaimed, surprised. "Word is, after all the personnel changes, he's now looking to cut costs in our department. He might even target the systems themselves." I sighed, trying to hide my unease. "There's not much we can do, Samuel. President Stephen has a habit of making cuts in critical areas. It's good he's enthusiastic, but his priorities are all wrong." Not long after, President Stephen arrived. He entered the room, his eyes scanning everything as though he were trying to figure out what we actually did there. "Isn't the air conditioning too high?" he asked suddenly. "Heating and cooling costs are significant, you know." I answered calmly, "Computers are sensitive to heat, so this temperature is necessary for management purposes." He gave a half-hearted nod, but seemed uninterested in my explanation. Ignoring me, he turned his attention to Samuel and started asking him questions. For some reason, he completely overlooked the fact that I was the manager. After wandering around the room for a while, he finally turned to me. "Stephen, right?" "Yes, Mr. President," I replied, surprised he even remembered my name. "How long have you been working here?" 30 years, I answered. 30 years? That's quite a long time," he said, his tone overly casual, almost dismissive. It grated on me, but I kept my composure. He continued, "I noticed your base salary is rather high. Was that part of your original employment terms?" "Yes, it was," I replied firmly. "Well, Samuel here is managing the system now too, isn't he?" "Technically, yes," I said, though his comment unsettled me. This was my first one-on-one conversation with the president, and despite my reservations, I decided to offer some advice. "Mr. President, I strongly recommend not replacing the current system. With all the personnel changes recently, many employees are still adjusting to their new roles. Switching systems now would only reduce efficiency further." President Stephen raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. Before I could explain further, he cut me off. "That's for me to decide," he snapped. I fell silent. His sudden harshness was unexpected. I'd never seen him look at anyone like that before, cold and condescending. "A worker like you challenging the president's decisions," he sneered. "You need to remember your place." "I'm sorry," I muttered, feeling a mix of anger and frustration. He smirked and added, "You're the manager, right, Stephen? Don't worry, I'll think about this thoroughly, just like I do with the system." His tone was dripping with sarcasm as he walked out. Samuel, who had been watching the whole exchange nervously, let out a sigh of relief once the president was gone. That was intense. "Mr. William, you're incredible." I shook my head. "I'm sorry, Samuel. I didn't mean to create such an awkward situation." "No, it's okay," he said quickly. Honestly, your viewpoint makes a lot of sense. But the president, he's incredibly frustrating. What's going through his mind? Probably nothing good, I said with a scowl. Samuel and I sat quietly for a moment, both deep in thought. After that day, we decided to have an honest conversation about our future plans. It seemed like the best course of action, considering the company's current state. A month later, I was summoned to the president's office. When I arrived, President Stephen greeted me with a forced smile. Stephen, thank you for all your hard work over the years, he began. I nodded politely, unsure of where this was going. Then he dropped the bombshell. We've decided to let you go. I stared at him in disbelief. What did you just say? It's not personal, he said with a grin. It's strictly business. He handed me a small packet, adding, This is your pension. The envelope he gave me looked cheap, and something about it felt wrong. Why wasn't the payment done via a bank transfer? Still in shock, I opened it to find a single coin inside, a dime. Mr. President, this isn't funny, not even as a joke, I said, my voice trembling with anger. Oh, it's no joke, he replied coolly. He pulled out a document and placed it on the desk in front of me. Take a look at this. I recognized the paper immediately. It was the employment contract I had signed 30 years ago when I first joined the company. President Stephen tapped a specific section of my old employment contract with his finger. Look here, he said smugly. Your employer pension is listed as 10 cents. My eyes widened in shock. Next to the section about the employer pension, which originally just stated pension provided, someone had scribbled in 10 cents with a ballpoint pen. The writing was unmistakably different from the printed text. President Stephen grinned triumphantly as he traced over the handwritten words. See, I didn't write this. It was already there. Amusing, isn't it? But you signed and stamped this contract, didn't you? I opened my mouth to object, but he cut me off before I could say a word. This is all by the book, he said firmly. Clean up and leave, just as stated in the contract. His expression made it clear that any argument would be pointless. I realized I had probably been on his radar for some time now. I was the kind of long-serving employee he wanted to push out, someone who represented the old guard he despised. The only reason I hadn't been targeted earlier was my control over the company's systems. But after his last visit to the system management room, he must have decided that Samuel was capable enough to take over. It didn't help that my honest advice during that visit had likely rubbed him the wrong way. What a petty and narrow-minded man, I thought. A company led by someone like him had no future. As I left his office, the faces of my colleagues who had been forced out before me came to mind, their frustration, their sadness. It all made sense now. I forced a smile. Understood, I said, then walked out, stuffing the flimsy envelope into my pocket. My next stop was the system management room. Samuel was waiting for me there, just as we had planned. It's time, Samuel, I said calmly. Samuel nodded, his face serious. I'm ready. We sat down at our computers and got to work. Dismantling a system is much easier than building one, and we had everything erased in no time. Soon, the office erupted into chaos. I could hear panicked voices through the walls. Hey, I can't send emails. The internal system isn't working. What's happening? The confusion was spreading quickly. I cracked the door open just enough to peek outside. People were running around, completely lost, unable to figure out what to do. It wasn't long before President Stephen showed up, pale and frantic. Stephen, he yelled, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. What did you do? I turned to face him, calm and composed. I did exactly what you asked, Mr. President, I said. What do you mean? Your personal belongings. Why did you delete the system? I replied, well, since the system belonged to me, I removed it. I was just tidying up what I had contributed to the company. What are you talking about? He asked, looking more confused than ever. I pulled out the same contract he had been so eager to show me earlier. It's all here, I said, pointing to a specific clause. This system wasn't the company's property. My salary over the years covered its loan, and the agreement was that I would return it when I left. You should have this document on file. It's been part of the records for 30 years. President Stephen stared at the contract, clearly flustered. What is this nonsense? It's ridiculous that one employee leaving can bring down the entire system. I resisted the urge to fire back about how equally ridiculous it was to offer a pension worth a single dime. Instead, I kept my voice steady. If you cancel my dismissal, I'll return both the system and your dime. He slammed the contract onto the desk. Samuel, restore the system immediately, he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Samuel hesitated but quickly nodded. Yes, sir. I'll get started right away, but it will take time. I don't care how long it takes. Just do it. President Stephen barked. As Samuel began the restoration process, I stood there quietly for a moment. Then, exchanging a glance with him, I decided it was time for me to leave. I walked out of the system management room where I had spent so many years of my life, my mind buzzing with determination. This wasn't over. A few days later, I was at home relaxing when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw the company's main number. I answered, and the first thing I heard was President Stephen's voice. Stephen, he said, sounding exhausted. We're in trouble. Samuel is struggling to restore the system, and nothing is working. We've already lost days of productivity, including the weekend. I could almost hear the desperation in his voice. It was a far cry from the smugness he'd shown me in his office. So what do you want me to do about it? I asked, suppressing a laugh. Sell us the system. I'll pay you $100,000. No, $200,000. I couldn't help but laugh. President, you have no idea what that system is worth, do you? That's nothing. What do you mean nothing? Then how much do you want? 1 million, I said bluntly. 1 million? His voice cracked, and I could almost picture the look on his face. Yes, 1 million, I said, keeping my tone steady. Even at that price, you're getting a bargain. That system is worth far more. This is outrageous, he snapped. That's more than your entire pension, which, as you'll recall, was just 10 cents. I replied dryly, realizing he wasn't taking me seriously. I dropped the playful tone. President Stephen, I mean it. If you don't pay $1 million, you won't get the system back, and I won't help Samuel restore it either. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his tone was icy enough. I won't give in to your ridiculous demands. How dare you ask for such an outrageous sum, you ungrateful man? He shouted before hanging up. I put down the phone, feeling a mix of disappointment and resolve. It was clear that this man was unfit to lead the company. I picked up the phone again, ready to move forward with the next phase of my plan. The next day, loud shouting erupted from the president's office. The sound came from Stephen, now the former president, slamming his fist on the desk. Why am I being fired? He demanded, his voice shaking with outrage. Facing him was Ethan Tyler, his father. Though Ethan wasn't fully recovered from his illness, his presence was commanding. Watching him from the doorway, I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. I'm not firing you, Ethan replied sternly. I'm demoting you to a regular employee. You need to start over and learn from the ground up. Stephen looked appalled. Me? A former president working as an ordinary employee? How humiliating. Ethan slammed his hand on the desk, making Stephen flinch and stand upright. Humiliating? Ethan bellowed. You should be ashamed of the chaos you've caused. You nearly destroyed this company. I stood silently as Ethan unleashed his frustration. I was a fool to believe your reports, he continued, I warned you not to interfere with personnel decisions, yet you forced out so many trusted people, including Stephen. At the mention of my name, Stephen turned his glare toward me. He knew I had played a role in his downfall. His reckless actions had been intolerable, and I had taken steps to bring the situation to Ethan's attention. Feeling guilty for disturbing Ethan during his recovery, I had sent him a detailed report about what was happening under Stephen's leadership. Ethan, who had trusted Stephen's updates without question, was shocked when he read my account. Realizing the company was on the brink of collapse, he decided to return to the office despite still needing treatment. When Ethan had said to me, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Stephen, my foolish son, would have destroyed the company I built," I knew I had done the right thing. Samuel and I had carefully planned our actions. We knew that if things continued as they were, I would eventually be forced out too. So we made the management system unusable, putting pressure on Stephen and his unresponsive supporters. It was the only form of resistance we could muster as the system department. As expected, the chaos that followed the system shutdown was immense. Stephen couldn't handle the situation, and even his staunchest supporters began to lose faith in him. For the first time, the hard-working employees spoke up. "Resign. Bring back President Ethan." The protests grew louder until Stephen was brought before the board. The criticism he faced was harsh but justified. The board called out his poor treatment of long-serving employees, his mishandling of layoffs, and the chaos caused by the system failure. During the meeting, the topic of my system came up. One board member said, "If we can purchase that system permanently for $1 million, it's a bargain. Why didn't the president buy it? Rebuilding it from scratch would cost far more in time and money." Hearing their appreciation for my work filled me with pride. All those years I had spent developing and maintaining the system had not been in vain. After the board's decision, Stephen was demoted. Back in the president's office, he sat across from Ethan, his head hung low. "I'm sorry," he said reluctantly, glancing at me. His apology was stiff, his dissatisfaction still visible. I kept my response simple. "Yeah." Ethan, observing the exchange, turned to me. "Stephen, I'm truly sorry for all the trouble. Will you consider coming back to the company?" he asked. He looked genuinely anxious, and his sincerity touched me. I smiled. "Yes, I'll come back as long as you're the one in charge." "Thank you," Ethan said, relief evident in his voice. Then he asked, "Should we go ahead and pay the $1 million for the system?" "That won't be necessary," I replied. "You've already given me so much over the years." Ethan laughed, and I joined in. Stephen, sitting off to the side, watched us with a puzzled expression. Later, back in the system management room, Samuel looked at me with admiration. "I'm glad everything worked out, Mr. William," he said. "I was so nervous about how it would all turn out." "You went through a lot too, Samuel," I said. "You even had to work over the weekend because of all this." Samuel shook his head with a smile. "If it means making the company a better place, I'd give up my weekends any time. Besides, all I really did was pretend I couldn't fix the system." I chuckled. "Your acting was perfect. It was the key to resolving everything." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Stephen was terrible, though, offering you a 10-cent pension and even faking the contract. That's just unbelievable." I hesitated, then said, "Actually, there's something you should know. That handwritten 10 cents in the contract. I wrote it myself." Samuel's eyes widened. "What? What do you mean?" I smiled, sensing his curiosity. "Let me tell you a story. A story about my younger self and how I ended up here. It's something I've never shared with anyone before. Back in middle and high school, I was a loner. I couldn't fit in, and I struggled to communicate with others. Most of my time was spent alone in my room, tinkering with my computer. It became my world, my escape. I developed original source codes and built systems from scratch. One day, Ethan Tyler, a friend of my father's, heard about my work. He recognized my talent and offered me a job as a system manager at his company. For someone like me, who had been shut away for years, his belief in my abilities meant everything. Not only did he value my work, but he also offered me a salary far above what a high school graduate could typically expect. Ethan's faith in me gave me a chance to step into the world, and for that, I would always be grateful. I still remember the day Ethan offered me that unusually high salary. Even as a young man, I knew the amount he proposed was far more than I deserved. I can't accept this much, I told him honestly. But Ethan simply shook his head. This is still a modest offer, he replied. Our company is just getting started, and this is all we can afford right now. But as the company grows, we'll make sure to give you raises. Your system is that valuable. His words left me stunned. In a moment of impulsiveness and youthful innocence, I took the contract he handed me and scribbled something with a ballpoint pen. I wrote 10 cents next to the term employer pension. Ethan's eyes widened when he saw what I had written. 10 cents, he asked, surprised. Yes, I said earnestly. I already feel bad accepting such a high salary every month. I don't want to take any extra money when I leave. This is my idea of fairness. Though he must have found my reasoning amusing, Ethan simply gave a gentle smile. Let's think of it this way, he said. We'll consider this system as a loan to the company. I'll include that in your work contract and prepare a formal document for it later. When you leave, you're free to take the system back, but if we need it, we'll buy it from you. Wouldn't that act as the employer pension? I nodded, realizing how clever the arrangement was. You noticed that right away, Ethan added, chuckling warmly. You're remarkably sharp. His laughter put me at ease, and at that moment, I decided I would follow Ethan's lead no matter what. He had seen something in me when I was at my lowest, and his faith pulled me out of my shell. When I finished recounting this story to Samuel, he let out a deep breath. So that's what happened between you and the president, he said, his voice filled with awe. Yeah, I replied, but I never imagined that contract would resurface because of Stephen. As for Stephen, he didn't last long at the company. After his demotion, unable to bear the idea of working as a regular employee, he resigned and started a business with a friend. However, Ethan later told me that Stephen's venture was struggling financially and didn't seem to be going well. Even after recovering and returning to full-time leadership, Ethan faced countless challenges. I could only hope Stephen wouldn't disrupt his father's work any further. I need to let him learn the hard way, Ethan said firmly. One day, it's like a lion throwing its cub into the valley to teach it how to survive. I doubted Stephen would ever ask for help, even if he needed it. He had chosen to quit on his own, and he was too proud to admit defeat. With Ethan back in charge, the company slowly regained its energy and focus. Samuel and I worked tirelessly to make up for lost time, developing a new system that was more efficient and user-friendly. Things were starting to feel right again. One day, I received unexpected news during a visit to Ethan's office. What do you want me to do? I asked him, curious about the purpose of the meeting. Ethan leaned back in his chair and smiled. I want you to work as an executive, he said simply. I froze. An executive? I asked, surprised. Yes, he said, his tone serious yet kind. You're my right-hand man now. Eventually, I'd like you to become the executive vice president. I hope you'll agree to work alongside me as we rebuild this company. The weight of his words hit me hard. Executive vice president, the title itself carried immense responsibility. It meant overseeing the entire organization and standing as Ethan's closest advisor. Do you really think I'm suited for a role like this? I asked hesitantly. Ethan's gaze softened as it always did when he sensed my doubts. The next generation is ready, aren't they? He said, referring to Samuel and the younger employees we had been mentoring. I nodded. Yes, I'm confident Samuel can handle it. There's no issue there. Then let's get started, Ethan said with a smile. We need to prepare for the shareholders' meeting and finalize your executive appointment contract. His use of the word contract made us both chuckle. Make sure you don't write 10 cents on this one, he teased. Oh, don't worry. I won't, I replied, laughing along with him. The warmth in the room was palpable, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of hope and belonging. As I left the president's office, a thought struck me. Could I, as an executive, help back some of my colleagues who had left in despair? The idea filled me with determination. I was grateful I had fought to defend this company, even when the odds were stacked against me. This company had given me a chance to step out of my isolated world and find happiness under the open sky. It had become more than just a workplace. It was a place that connected people, past, present, and future. As I walked back to my office, I felt the cool breeze of a new beginning. For the first time, I was moving forward. My name is Jordan, and for years, I worked at Hawthorne Technologies, a mid-sized ed company that had its fair share of ups and downs. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, and in this economy, that was enough for me. I had worked my way up from the bottom, starting as a junior developer fresh out of college to becoming one of the lead engineers in the company. Things were good, and I was proud of the work I did. But all of that changed on a cold, dreary Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk, sipping my third cup of coffee, trying to fix a bug in a project we had been working on for weeks. The office was quiet. Most people were either heads down in their work or out in meetings. I had my headphones in, focused on the screen in front of me, when I saw him. Gavin Hawthorne. He was the CEO's son, and he had recently been given a more prominent role within the company. Gavin was young, just a few years older than me, and arrogant. He was the kind of guy who didn't earn his position, but rather was handed it on a silver platter because of his last name. I didn't have much to do with him, but I had heard the whispers around the office about his management style, pushy, demanding, and sometimes downright mean. He walked into the room with that confident, almost cocky stride, his eyes scanning the place as though he owned it. His gaze landed on me, and I immediately felt a sense of unease. Jordan, can I talk to you for a minute? He asked, his voice lacking any warmth. I pulled my headphones off, trying to read his expression. Something about it didn't sit right with me. Sure, what's up? I replied, trying to sound casual. He motioned for me to follow him, and I grabbed my things, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. We made our way to the break room, away from prying eyes. Once we were alone, he turned to me, a look of cold determination on his face. Jordan, we're letting you go, he said, almost as if he were reading off a script. My heart skipped a beat. What? Why? I've been with the company for almost 5 years. I'm one of the lead engineers. I know, he said, barely meeting my gaze. But my father has decided to go in a different direction. We're restructuring the team, and we don't need someone like you anymore. I blinked, trying to process his words. What are you talking about? You can't just fire me like this. I've been loyal to this company. I've given it my all. His expression remained indifferent. It's not personal, Jordan. It's just business. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I forced myself to stay calm. This is bullshit, Gavin. I've worked harder than most people here. I've sacrificed my time, my energy, and now you're just going to throw me out? You don't even have a real reason. Gavin sighed, clearly bored with the conversation. Like I said, it's not personal. It's just how things are now. I was stunned. This wasn't happening. Not to me. Not after everything I'd done for this company. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but instead, I just stood there, feeling my world crumbling around me. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. If that's how it is, then I guess I'm out. But you'll regret this, Gavin. You'll see. He didn't respond, just turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, completely numb. The drive home that day was a blur. I had my hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel, knuckles white, but my mind was racing with disbelief. How could this happen? How could Gavin, a guy who barely knew the ins and outs of coding, fire someone like me? Someone who had worked tirelessly, put in late nights, solved the toughest problems that had stumped entire teams. I had poured my heart into that company, and it felt like it meant nothing. I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. There had to be some kind of mistake, right? Maybe Gavin was just acting out of impulse. Maybe he didn't have the authority to fire me. I couldn't believe that this was the end of my career at Hawthorne Technologies, not after everything I'd done. When I walked through the door at home, my girlfriend, Emma, was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, her smile quickly fading when she saw the look on my face. "Jordan, what's wrong?" she asked, setting her phone aside. I didn't have the words at first. How could I explain what had just happened? The emotions bubbling inside of me were a tangled mess of anger, confusion, and fear. I'm fired, I finally muttered, sitting down beside her. My voice cracked as I said the words, and I felt the lump in my throat tighten. Emma blinked, her expression one of shock. "What? You're fired? Why?" "I don't know," I said, running my hands through my hair in frustration. Gavin just told me they were restructuring the team, that they didn't need me anymore. She frowned, clearly not understanding. "But you've been there for so long. You're one of the best engineers on the team. How can they just get rid of you?" "I don't know, Emma," I muttered, looking down at my hands. "I've put in so much work, so many hours, and now it's like none of it matters." My words came out in a bitter rush. I thought I was making a difference. I thought I was more than just another cog in the machine. Emma took my hand, her voice soft but firm. "Jordan, you are more than that. And if they can't see it, then they don't deserve you. But what are we going to do now?" I stared at her, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. Hawthorne Technologies had been my life for years. I didn't know what came next, didn't know where I was supposed to go from here. What was I supposed to do without the place that had defined my career? I felt unmoored, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice low. "I don't know what to do next. I feel lost. I've always been the one who fixed things, solved the problems. Now I'm the one who's broken." The next few days were a blur of applications, interviews, and endless emails. Each rejection stung, especially after everything that had happened. The worst part wasn't the loss of the job itself, but the realization that I wasn't as irreplaceable as I had once thought. It hurt to think that my years of loyalty had amounted to nothing more than a few words from Gavin. The feeling of betrayal gnawed at me, the anger growing with each passing hour. The future I had imagined for myself was slipping through my fingers, and I had no control over it. Then came the bombshell. I had gotten an email from a former colleague at Hawthorne, someone who had left the company a few months before I was let go. He had been a senior manager and was still in touch with some of the higher-ups. The subject line read, "You've been played." I clicked it, heart pounding in my chest as I read the message. "Jordan, I don't know if you've heard the full story, but I think you should know the truth. Gavin isn't just restructuring for business reasons. His father is about to retire, and Gavin is trying to take over the company. The layoffs are part of his plan to make room for his own people. He's been pushing for your position for months now. The whole restructuring thing. It's a cover. You were targeted, and the worst part is, I'm not sure your father even knows. Be careful." I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart racing. Betrayal. That was the only word I could think of. Gavin had been playing a long game, and I had been an unfortunate casualty in his rise to power. It wasn't just about business. This was personal, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't let it slide. I couldn't let Gavin win. What bothered me most was how easily I had been manipulated. I'd been the loyal employee, the one who had always done his job without complaining, without asking for anything in return. I had trusted the system, trusted that my work would speak for itself. But it hadn't. And now, everything I had worked for felt like it had been a waste. But it was more than that. It was the way Gavin had gone about it. The coldness in his eyes when he fired me, the lack of empathy, the way he had made it sound like a business decision when in reality, it had been all about him positioning himself for power. And worse, it was the way the entire company had stood by, watching it unfold. I wasn't just fired. I was used, discarded when I no longer served a purpose in Gavin's plan. But this wasn't how my story would end. I couldn't let this go. Gavin had done more than fire me. He had taken my dignity, my years of hard work, and my sense of security, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. He had underestimated me, and I was going to make sure he knew that. The next few days were like living in a fog. I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal that lingered, even as I put one foot in front of the other, trying to rebuild my life. I spent hours in front of the computer, scouring job boards, polishing my resume, and sending out applications. Each time I hit send, I could feel the weight of the empty inbox, the silence from potential employers who hadn't even bothered to respond. It felt like the world was moving on without me, and I was left behind, struggling to catch up. But what made the pain worse wasn't the job search. It wasn't even the financial strain that loomed ahead. It was the gnawing anger, the feeling of being manipulated, of being a pawn in a game I hadn't agreed to play. I couldn't just let this go. Gavin had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to sit idly while he ruined everything I had worked for. I decided to do what I should have done sooner: dig deeper. That's when I reached out to my old colleague, Ben. Ben had worked at Hawthorne for years before taking a new job at a competitor. We had always been on the same wavelength, and I knew he'd have some insight into what was really going on behind the scenes. "Ben, I need to know everything you know about Gavin," I said over the phone one evening. "There's something going on at Hawthorne. He's been playing a game, and I need to understand how deep it goes." Ben hesitated on the other end, and I could practically hear him weighing his options. He was cautious, but after a long pause, he finally spoke. "Gavin's been trying to take over the company for months. His dad's retirement is imminent, and he's been positioning himself to take control. It's not just you, Jordan. He's been pushing other people out too. But you were the biggest obstacle for him. You were in the role he wanted. You were the one who had everything he needed to make his move." My stomach churned. The realization hit me harder than I expected. Gavin wasn't just trying to rise through the ranks. He was planning to take over everything. I wasn't the only one being targeted. He had been quietly clearing the way, getting rid of anyone who posed a threat to his position, and I had been too naive to see it. "Are you saying he's been making moves behind the scenes, setting up people to replace us?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Exactly," Ben confirmed. "He's been moving fast, Jordan. You're not the first to get the axe, and you won't be the last. He's been consolidating power, getting rid of the older staff, those who actually know how the company works, and bringing in his own people. You've got to get out of there, man. It's toxic." But I couldn't just walk away, not after everything. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Gavin wasn't just a greedy CEO's son. He was a fraud. He had no real skill, no real vision. He was using his last name to destroy a company that I had helped build. The next day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Gavin get away with this. I started by gathering evidence. I combed through old emails, looking for patterns, for any sign that Gavin had been manipulating the situation for his own gain. It wasn't easy. Hawthorne's IT system was well secured, but after years of working there, I knew a few tricks. I found what I needed. Internal emails where Gavin had been pushing for layoffs, making excuses for why certain employees were expendable. He was manipulating the company's financial reports, cutting costs in the areas that had the highest impact on morale, while funneling money into the areas that would benefit his power grab. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I read through the documents. This wasn't just about getting revenge on a bitter ex-boss. This was about exposing the truth, showing the world exactly what Gavin had been doing behind closed doors. He had no idea how much evidence I had, how deep I had dug, and I wasn't about to back down. But things weren't that simple. I couldn't just take this to the authorities, at least, not yet. The company was still in the early stages of transitioning to Gavin's control, and I knew that going public without the right support could backfire. I needed a plan, something that would expose Gavin's scheme without putting me at risk. That's when I turned to my network. I reached out to a few former colleagues who still had connections at Hawthorne. One of them, Carla, had worked as a senior HR manager before leaving the company a few months ago. If anyone knew the inner workings of Hawthorne's leadership, it was her. We met at a coffee shop, and after exchanging pleasantries, I didn't waste any time. "Carla, I need your help," I said, leaning in. "I've got evidence that Gavin has been manipulating things behind the scenes, pushing for layoffs and restructuring to make room for his own people. I can't do this alone. I need you to back me up." Her eyes widened, and she hesitated before speaking. "Are you sure, Jordan? If you go after Gavin, you could lose everything. He's got his father's ear, and there are people in that company who will do anything to protect him." "I'm already losing everything," I shot back. "But if I let him get away with this, it'll destroy more than just my career. It'll ruin the company, and no one will even know how it happened. I can't let him take everything down with him." Carla's expression softened, and after a long pause, she nodded. "All right, I'll help. But we have to be careful. If Gavin catches wind of what we're doing, we could be in serious trouble. You've got to be ready for whatever comes next." I nodded. I wasn't afraid anymore. Gavin had taken everything from me, my career, my sense of security, and now I was going to take back control. The stakes had never been higher. The plan was set. Carla and I had gathered enough evidence to expose Gavin, the manipulative, power-hungry fraud he was. We had identified the key players in his scheme, those who had helped him orchestrate the layoffs and pave the way for his takeover of the company. We even had recordings of his meetings with senior management, where he openly discussed cutting costs by removing staff who posed any challenge to his authority. The walls were closing in on him, and I could feel it. But even with everything in place, something inside me twisted with uncertainty. Was I doing the right thing? Was I prepared for the consequences of what I was about to do? The truth was, no matter how satisfying it might feel to expose Gavin, I knew it could all backfire. This wasn't just about exposing a bad boss. It was about taking down a company that had been part of my life for years. It was about starting a war that might destroy everything I had worked for. But the more I thought about it, the clearer the path became. I couldn't let him win. Gavin had used me, manipulated me, and now he would have to answer for it. Carla had connections at a major media outlet, an investigative reporter who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. After hours of planning and careful deliberation, we arranged a meeting. This was it. I had no more time to hesitate. If I backed out now, everything would be for nothing. The day before the meeting, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. I sat in my apartment, staring at the stack of files on the table in front of me. My phone buzzed with messages from Emma, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. What could I say? I was about to wage a war against someone with more power than I could ever have imagined. There was no guarantee that this would end well, and I was terrified. But I also knew I couldn't just walk away. I needed to finish this. The next morning, I met with Carla and the reporter at a small cafe near the city center. The air inside was thick with tension, as if the whole world was holding its breath. I slid into the booth across from the reporter, a woman in her mid-30s named Rachel, who had a reputation for uncovering corporate scandals that sent shockwaves through the business world. She greeted me with a sharp smile, and her eyes flickered over the files I had brought. "This is big," Rachel said, her tone calm but serious. "This isn't just about you, Jordan. If this gets out, it could be the end of Gavin's career, and the company's too." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart pounded in my chest as the enormity of the situation hit me once again. But he deserves to be held accountable. What he's done to Hawthorne is nothing short of criminal. He's used his father's retirement as an excuse to gut the company and fill it with his own people. He's ruined lives. Rachel nodded, her gaze intense. "We can't go public with this right away. The first step is to get confirmation from someone inside the company, someone who can corroborate the evidence. Otherwise, it's just a story without a foundation." I felt my stomach drop. If we couldn't get confirmation from someone in a position of power at Hawthorne, all of this would be for nothing. But I knew exactly who that person needed to be. Ben. Ben had been in the trenches with Gavin. He knew the inner workings of the company better than anyone. He had seen the way Gavin operated, and, as much as it pained me to ask, he was the only one who could validate everything we had uncovered. I dialed his number, my fingers trembling. The phone rang, and for a moment, I thought he wasn't going to pick up. But then his voice came through, as casual as ever. "Then, it's Jordan. I need your help." I could feel a hesitation on the other end. "What's going on? Is everything all right?" "I've got the proof, Ben. I know what Gavin's been doing, and I'm about to take him down. But I need you to back me up. I need you to confirm everything we've uncovered. It's the only way this works." There was a long silence before Ben spoke, his voice barely audible. "Jordan, you know what you're asking, right? This isn't just about you anymore. If I help you, there's no going back. Gavin's not going to let this slide." "I know," I said, my heart racing. "But I can't let him get away with it. He's destroying everything we've worked for. Please, Ben, you're the only one who can help me." Ben sighed, and for a long moment, I thought he was going to back out. But then, finally, he spoke. "All right, I'll do it. But we have to be careful. If Gavin finds out I'm involved, it's over for both of us." I hung up, a mix of relief and fear flooding my chest. Ben was on board. This was really happening. Later that afternoon, we met at Hawthorne's headquarters. The tension in the air was palpable as Carla, Rachel, and I waited for Ben to arrive. I couldn't stop pacing, my thoughts racing with the possibilities of what could go wrong. This was it, the final step. If this didn't work, Gavin would win. But if we succeeded, everything would change. When Ben walked into the room, I could see the weight of the decision in his eyes. He was taking a huge risk. He knew it, I knew it, and yet there was no turning back. "I'm in," Ben said quietly, his voice tinged with resignation. "Let's get this over with." As we sat down to go over the details, I felt the gravity of the moment hit me. This wasn't just about getting revenge on Gavin. It wasn't even just about saving my career. This was about holding someone accountable for their actions, for their deceit, for the people whose lives had been shattered in the wake of their greed. The first step was in motion. But I could already feel the weight of the war that was about to begin. The next few weeks felt like living in a constant state of heightened awareness. Every phone call, every email, every knock at the door sent my heart racing. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. After months of uncertainty and fear, the moment of truth had arrived. The pieces were in place. The truth about Gavin's manipulation, his attempts to take over the company by pushing out key employees, was about to be exposed. I had no idea how this would unfold, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back. We had agreed to move cautiously. Ben's confirmation had been the tipping point. With his testimony, we had the legal grounds to go public. Rachel, the reporter, had done her part by pulling in a team of investigators to verify the claims. The story was slowly building momentum. Once it hit the press, there would be no way for Gavin to deny it. His grip on Hawthorne would slip, and the truth would come to light. The morning the story was released, I woke up to dozens of missed calls. My inbox was flooded with messages. The first few were from people I hadn't spoken to in years, former colleagues who had either already left or were on the verge of quitting. Then came the messages from reporters, lawyers, and even a few old friends who had heard the news. It was happening. The story was out, and there was no stopping it. The immediate fallout was nothing short of chaos. Gavin went into damage control mode almost instantly. The media descended on Hawthorne's headquarters, and within hours, a series of internal investigations were launched. Investors pulled their funding, executives were forced to step down, and Gavin was confronted with the full extent of his actions. But the most profound moment came when I finally heard from my former boss. Mr. Hawthorne Sr., I had always respected him, even if our professional relationship had been strained at times. I had no idea what kind of conversation we would have, but I wasn't prepared for the phone call I received. "Jordan, it's Henry. I need to speak with you." His voice crackled through the phone. I swallowed hard, my heart in my throat. "Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. What's going on?" "You know what's going on, don't you? This mess with my son, Gavin. It's a disaster. I never wanted any of this, but I didn't see it coming. I've been blinded by my own plans for the company. I'm sorry, Jordan. I should have seen it. I should have stopped him before it got this far. We're bankrupt without you." My chest tightened. Mr. Hawthorne was admitting what I had known all along. Gavin's actions had almost destroyed everything the company had built. But hearing him acknowledge it, hearing him admit his failure, was something I hadn't expected. In that moment, I realized just how much I had underestimated the role I had played in the company's success. It wasn't just Gavin who had taken me for granted. It was Mr. Hawthorne, too. "I never wanted to hurt the company, Henry," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've dedicated years of my life to this place. I wanted to see it succeed, not crumble." "I know, Jordan, and I don't expect you to forgive me," he replied, his voice laden with regret. "But I need you to know something. I'm stepping down. I can't fix this, not alone. You're the only one who can." The words hit me like a tidal wave. Mr. Hawthorne, the man who had always been in charge, was stepping aside. He was giving up his position to allow someone else to lead. And that someone else could be me. It was a moment that carried so much weight. I could feel my pulse quicken as the magnitude of the situation sank in. The decision I made next would shape the course of my future. And not just mine, but the future of the company too. A few days later, a board meeting was called. Gavin was gone. The scandal surrounding him had forced him out of the company entirely. His father, though reluctant, had agreed to the decision. The board now had to choose a new leader, and when they asked for nominations, I found myself in the midst of it all. "Jordan," Mr. Hawthorne said in front of the room, "it's time for you to step up. I may have failed, but you're the one who knows this company inside and out. You're the one who deserves to lead it into the future." The room went silent. All eyes were on me. There were other candidates, of course, but none of them had the history with Hawthorne that I did. None of them had the drive to rebuild the company from the ground up. I had made mistakes, sure. I had trusted the wrong people. But I had never stopped believing in what Hawthorne could be. I stood up, my mind racing. This wasn't just a position. It was a chance to rewrite the company's future, to steer it away from the wreckage Gavin had left behind. I thought about the people who had supported me through the hardest times, about the colleagues who had believed in me even when I had lost faith in myself. And then I made the decision. "I accept," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. But there's one thing I want to make clear. I will rebuild this company, but it will be on my terms. I won't repeat the mistakes of the past. We will be a company that values its people, that puts integrity above all else. It wasn't an easy decision. I had spent so much time thinking about revenge, about making Gavin pay for what he had done. But standing there, looking at the board, I realized that the best way to defeat Gavin wasn't to tear him down further. It was to rise above him. It was to lead with strength, honor, and vision. In the end, the conflict wasn't just about fighting Gavin. It was about reclaiming my own sense of purpose, about learning that power, when used for the right reasons, could change not just a company, but a person's life. As I took the reins of the company, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more betrayals, and more difficult decisions. But I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by a fake ally. I was someone who had learned the value of integrity, the importance of trust, and the strength that comes from standing up for what is right. And in that moment, I realized that this was the victory I had been waiting for all along.